I want you to do something for me right now. Before you read another word, I want you to stop and think about the last 24 hours of your life online. Think about the very first thing you searched this morning, the thing you typed before you were even fully awake. Think about the email you sent to your doctor last week. Think about the one you sent to your accountant or to your partner or to someone you hadn't spoken to in years. Think about the video you watched at midnight when you couldn't sleep, the one you'd be slightly embarrassed to explain out loud. Think about the route you drove to that appointment you don't really talk about, the one you navigated to on your phone because you didn't want to be late. Think about the question you typed into a search bar at 3 a.m. because you were scared or confused or just deeply curious, and the internet felt like the only place safe enough to ask it. Think about all of it. Every tap, every scroll, every search, every pause, every moment of anxiety or hope or private curiosity that you expressed through a screen. Now ask yourself this: who was watching? Because someone was. One company. One single company saw almost all of it, recorded it, stored it, analyzed it, built a detailed model of exactly who you are from it, and turned that model into money. The extraordinary part. The part that, once you see it clearly, is very hard to unsee, is that you handed all of it to them voluntarily, every single day, for free. I know because I did exactly the same thing for 17 years. And then one afternoon, I sat down and actually really looked, at what I'd given away and what had been built from it. What I found in those files changed everything, and I need to walk you through exactly what it was. I want to be very clear up front about what this is and what it isn't. I'm not here to scare you. I'm not here to push a conspiracy theory. I'm not here to tell you that you need to live in a digital cabin off the grid, using only candlelight and carrier pigeons to communicate. What I'm here to do is show you the same thing I saw, in the same cold, specific, concrete detail, and let you decide for yourself what it means for you. Because here's the truth that I've come to understand. The overwhelming majority of people who use Google's products, and that is most of the people on this planet, have never once looked at the full picture of what they're participating in. Not because they don't care about their privacy, not because they're naive or careless, but because the full picture has never been laid out in front of them all at once, calmly, fairly, without exaggeration. Until right now. Let's begin with the number that stopped me when I first encountered it, because this number is the foundation of everything else I'm going to tell you. $349.8 billion. That is the revenue Google generated in the calendar year 2024, in 12 months. $349.8 billion. And when you look carefully at where that money actually comes from, not the headline figure, but the breakdown, something becomes staggeringly clear. In just the first quarter of 2024 alone, more than 76% of Google's total revenue came from advertising, not from selling. Devices, not from cloud computing contracts with enterprise clients, not from hardware. Advertising. Targeted, personalized, precisely engineered advertising that only works and only generates those kinds of returns. Because Google knows exactly who you are, what you care about, what you're planning to buy, what you're afraid of, what keeps you scrolling at 11 o'clock at night. And the raw material powering that machine, the fuel that makes it all run, is the behavioral data of the people using their free services. People like you, people like me, all of us, billions of us, feeding the most profitable data operation in human history every day, completely without charge, in exchange for services we've come to treat as oxygen. That is the deal. Most of us never fully read the fine print. So let me walk you through it, service by service. Because when you see the pieces individually, it's easy to dismiss each one. When you see them all together, the picture becomes something you can't stop thinking about. Let's start with Gmail, because this is where my personal wake-up moment began. I had a Gmail account since 2008, 17 years. 17 years of emails sitting in Google's servers. And I'm not talking about newsletters and promotional spam. I'm talking about medical records, financial documents, legal correspondence, job negotiations, messages to people I loved during hard periods of my life, conversations I never imagined anyone else would read. For most of those 17 years, I assumed the privacy situation was fairly simple. Google stores my emails, keeps them safe from hackers and other outsiders. I get free storage, and the world keeps spinning. Then I actually looked into the history of what Gmail has been doing since it launched, the history that Google doesn't exactly lead with in their marketing. When Gmail launched in 2004, it came with an offer that seemed almost impossibly generous, 1 full gigabyte of free email storage, at a time when competitors were offering a tiny fraction of that. In exchange, and this was the part most people skimmed past, Google's automated systems would scan the content of your emails to serve you targeted advertising. Every email you received, every email you sent, the words, the subjects, the topics, the emotional tenor of your conversations, all of it processed by automated systems and used to match advertisements to what was being discussed in your inbox. You'd write to a friend about planning a beach vacation, and suddenly hotel ads would appear everywhere you looked online. You'd receive a message from your doctor, and ads related to that medical condition would start following you across every website you visited. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't the paranoid speculation of a privacy activist. This was Google's explicitly stated documented business practice, running without interruption from 2004 until 2017. 13 years. Let that number sit for a second. 13 years of every email you sent or received being read by Google's automated systems and used to sell advertising against your private communications. In 2017, facing sustained pressure from privacy advocates and, critically, from major corporations whose employees used Google Workspace and were deeply uncomfortable knowing their business emails were being analyzed this way. Google announced it would stop scanning email content for advertising targeting. To their credit, they did stop that specific practice. That's accurate, and it deserves to be stated fairly. But here is where the headline and the underlying reality start to diverge significantly. Google stopped scanning your email to serve you ads. They did not stop scanning your email. Google's automated systems still read every email you receive. They scan for spam. They scan for phishing attempts. They sort your inbox into those primary, social, and promotions tabs. They power Smart Reply, those 3 suggested responses that appear at the bottom of emails. They power Smart Compose, which predicts words as you type a reply. Every single one of these features requires that Google's systems process the content of your messages. The scanning never stopped. What changed is what the results of that scanning are used for. Google says they scan your email for features, not for ads. That distinction is real, and I want to acknowledge it. But here is what I couldn't reconcile and move past. Google has access to my emails. Their systems read my emails. The technical infrastructure for analyzing the content of my most private communications is not hypothetical. It is operational, running every single day, serving real features I use constantly. The barrier between scanning for features and scanning for advertising targeting is a policy decision made by current leadership under current conditions. Policies change, leadership changes, regulatory environments shift, companies are acquired. The content of my inbox, 17 years of the most personal communications of my adult life, sits on Google's servers, readable by their systems, subject to whatever policies apply at any given point in the future. There is also something almost nobody talks about when discussing Gmail's privacy, and it is the complete absence of something rather than the problematic presence of something. Gmail does not use end-to-end encryption. When you send a Gmail, Google holds the encryption keys. They can decrypt and read your messages. The encryption Gmail uses protects your data in transit while it travels from Google's servers to your device, but it does not protect the content of your email from Google itself. Google can read your email. The technical capability is there. They say they don't use it for ads, but they have it. Compare that to Proton Mail, which is what I moved to. Proton Mail is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland, under some of the strongest data protection laws in the world. With Proton Mail, emails between Proton users are encrypted before they leave your device. Proton servers store the message in encrypted form with a key that Proton does not hold. The only people who can read what I write are me and the person I wrote it to, not the email provider. Not a government that serves Proton with a data request. Not a hacker who compromises a server. Just me and my recipient. Proton Mail crossed 100 million users in 2023. This is not a niche service for privacy hobbyists. It is a mainstream product built on a fundamentally different philosophy. The transition from Gmail to Proton took me one afternoon. I used Google's own export tool called Takeout to download my email archive. I set up my Proton account in about 5 minutes. I activated automatic forwarding from Gmail so new messages would arrive in both inboxes during the changeover. Over the following weeks, I updated my address with the services and contacts that mattered. For the first time in 17 years, my email is technically, structurally, architecturally private. Not promised to be private by a policy that could change, actually private. Now let me tell you about Chrome, because this story surprised me even more than Gmail did. It surprised me because it didn't just involve corporate data policies or obscure settings buried in a help menu. It involved a federal lawsuit, $5 billion in claimed damages, and internal communications from Google employees in which they described their own product using language I did not expect. In 2020, a class action lawsuit was filed against Google alleging that Chrome had been tracking and collecting data from users who believed they were browsing privately in incognito mode. You know incognito mode. The dark screen, the figure with the hat and trench coat, the message that told you you were now browsing privately. Millions of people used incognito mode specifically because they believed it shielded them from tracking. Medical symptoms they didn't want attached to their name. Personal questions they were embarrassed to ask out loud. Sensitive research, private purchases. They went incognito because they understood that word to mean what it says. The lawsuit alleged that Google was not honoring that expectation, that even in incognito mode, Google Analytics, Google advertising tools, and other Google infrastructure embedded across the web were still collecting data about users, still building profiles, still tracking the behavior of people who thought they had gone dark. The settlement reached and made public in April of 2024 was revealing in ways that went far beyond the dollar amount. Google was required to delete billions of records collected from incognito sessions. They were required to rewrite the incognito mode disclaimer to accurately describe what it does and does not protect. The updated disclaimer now states that private browsing will not change how data is collected by the websites you visit, and the mode itself underwent a quiet but meaningful rebranding. It is no longer called private browsing. It is more private browsing. That one word, more, is doing an enormous amount of work. It acknowledges that private was never quite the right description. The internal communications surfaced through the litigation were the part that stayed with me the longest. Documents from within Google showed employees referring to incognito mode in their own internal conversations as a messy situation, a professional ethics and basic honesty issue, and in one phrase that I genuinely did not expect to read, as effectively a lie. One Google executive argued internally that calling incognito mode private was wrong because it risked deepening misconceptions that users already had. These were Google's own people, writing internally to each other, saying the word private attached to a mode marketed as private was misleading. But the incognito lawsuit is only one layer of the Chrome privacy picture. The deeper layer involves what Chrome does in completely normal browsing mode. No special privacy settings, no incognito, just regular everyday web use. And it involves something called browser fingerprinting that most people have never heard of, and which is more powerful than cookies in one critical and underappreciated way. Unlike cookies, you cannot delete a fingerprint. When you browse the internet, your browser involuntarily reveals dozens of tiny details about itself to every website you visit. Your screen resolution, the fonts installed on your operating system, the specific way your graphics card renders certain visual elements, your time zone, your browser plugins, your hardware configuration, your language settings. Individually, none of these signals identifies you, but combined, the specific pattern of all these signals together creates a profile that is frequently unique to your exact device, a fingerprint. And unlike a cookie, which you can clear from your browser settings, a fingerprint cannot be erased because it is derived from the fixed characteristics of your hardware and software. A website can identify your device by fingerprint even after you've cleared every cookie and every scrap of browsing history. Chrome, which holds roughly 66% of the global browser market, is the foundation of the web's tracking ecosystem. I moved to Firefox. Firefox is developed by Mozilla, a nonprofit organization whose business model is not built around advertising revenue. Firefox has significantly stronger fingerprint protection than Chrome, with enhanced tracking protection enabled by default that blocks known fingerprinting scripts and third-party trackers. It is open source, which means independent security researchers can audit exactly what it collects and what it doesn't, an accountability mechanism that simply doesn't exist with Chrome. The switch from Chrome to Firefox took about 10 minutes, including importing bookmarks, saved passwords, and browsing history during setup. For daily use, Firefox is functionally indistinguishable from Chrome. For users who want even more aggressive protection, the Brave browser, built on the same underlying engine as Chrome but with layered privacy protections added, is another excellent option. Google search requires me to be especially honest, because intellectual honesty is the whole reason this conversation is worth having. Google search is extraordinary. It processes more than 10 billion searches per day. It serves more than 4 billion users. It holds over 82% of the global search engine market. There is a reason for that dominance, and it is genuine quality. For the vast majority of queries, for most people, most of the time, Google is simply the best search engine that exists. It understands context, it understands intent, it surfaces relevant results with remarkable speed and accuracy. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, and I'm not going to overstate the case against it. But what Google search accumulates about you over time, like when you're logged into a Google account with default settings, is something you genuinely need to see to fully appreciate. Every search query you have ever made while logged in has been stored. The date, the exact time, the precise words you used, every question you asked when you were scared, every symptom you searched at 2 a.m. when you couldn't sleep and didn't want to worry anyone, every financial anxiety, every relationship question, every moment of private curiosity or confusion or grief or hope that you typed into a search bar because the internet felt like the safest place to put it. It's all there. Google calls it your web and app activity, and you can see it yourself right now by going to myactivity.google.com. If you've had a Google account for several years and never changed the default settings, what you'll find there will genuinely stop you. It is a complete, searchable, time-stamped record of your inner life as expressed through search, an archive that in many ways knows you better than your own memory does. Google also maintains an advertising profile for every user. You can view it at adsettings.google.com. It shows you what Google believes about you based on your online behavior, your estimated age range, your inferred interests, topics Google believes matter to you, categories that describe you as Google's systems understand you. This is what advertisers access when they want to reach people like you. Not your name, not your identity document, but your pattern, the model of who you are and what you're responsive to. I switched my default search engine to DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo does not track your searches, does not build a profile, does not use your history to shape future results. You type a query, results appear, and the transaction ends there. For approximately 90% of everyday searches, DuckDuckGo returns results that are just as useful as Google's. For the 10% where Google's deeper index genuinely matters, you can type a G followed by a space before your query, and DuckDuckGo routes that specific search to Google. You get the best of both approaches, in the rare cases where you need it. The adjustment period is about 2 days before it feels completely natural. Google Maps needs a specific spotlight because what happened here wasn't just a privacy concern. It was a legal settlement that made national news for a few days and then faded from public conversation before most people had processed what it actually meant. For years, Google Maps tracked your precise physical location every time you used the app. And on Android devices with Google accounts and location services enabled, which describes most Android devices in MO. Saint situations, your device was periodically reporting its location to Google even when you weren't actively using Maps or any Google app. The result was a database containing a detailed physical timeline of where millions of people had actually been, not general regions. Specific GPS coordinates with timestamps, your home address derived from where you consistently slept. The medical specialist's office you visited twice in 3 weeks, the support group you attended every Tuesday evening, the immigration attorney's building, the fertility clinic, the hospital wing, the political event you drove to on a Saturday afternoon, all of it stored. And then law enforcement discovered that database existed. Prosecutors and investigators across the United States began issuing what are called geofence warrants, legal requests to Google asking it to identify every device that had been within a specific geographic area at a specific time. If a crime occurred at a location, authorities could demand from Google a list of every person whose Android phone had been nearby, regardless of why they were there. This caught innocent people. There are documented cases of individuals who had been near a crime scene for completely innocent reasons, cycling, commuting, running errands, being flagged as suspects because their location data was in Google's database. Google faced legal action from attorneys general across 40 states. The resulting settlement required Google to pay $62 million and to be more transparent about location data collection. I switched to Apple Maps. Apple's business model is built on hardware and subscription services, not on advertising, so your location data isn't being harvested to build a targeting profile. For navigation purposes, Apple Maps is accurate, reliable, and feature-complete for everyday use. Now, I need to give you the framework that makes every individual service I've described mean something larger, because the pieces separately are concerning. What they add up to together is something of a different order entirely. Google doesn't know you from one service. Google knows you across all its services simultaneously, and the combination is what makes it categorically different from almost any other company in terms of what they actually understand about you as a person. Your search queries tell Google what you're thinking, the questions you ask when nobody's watching. Your Gmail tells Google who you communicate with, about what, and in what emotional register. Your Maps tells Google where you physically go and when, and the actual geography of your life. Your YouTube tells Google what captures your attention and for how long, what holds you and what makes you click away. Your Chrome tells Google which websites you visit, how long you stay, and what paths you take across the web. Your Android tells Google which apps you use, what you purchase, what notifications you respond to, and what your daily routine looks like. Your Google Photos tells Google what you look like, who the people close to you are, where your pictures were taken, and what moments you considered worth remembering. None of these individual data streams is catastrophically revealing in isolation, but Google doesn't experience them as isolated streams. Google experiences them as a single, unified river. One profile, one person, seen from every possible angle, through every possible lens, across every hour of every day, across years. The search you made at 2 a.m., the route you took to work this morning, the video you watched twice in a row last week, the email about your health, situation that sat in your inbox for 3 weeks before you responded, the appointment you navigated to in Maps, all of that, one profile, yours. That profile is not sold to advertisers with your name attached. Google's documented policy is clear that they do not sell your personal information to third parties. What they sell is access to the pattern, the ability to place an advertisement in front of people who have these interests, who live in this area, who recently searched for these things, who fall in this age range, who have shown behavioral signals suggesting they're ready to make this kind of decision. The advertisement reaches you without your name being handed to anyone. But you are absolutely the target, and the profile is absolutely the reason the advertisement found you. That profile is built from the most comprehensive mapping of any individual's digital life that has ever existed at scale. YouTube deserves the most honest treatment of everything I'm going to say here, because YouTube is the hardest service to walk away from, and I want to acknowledge that plainly. More than 2 billion people log into YouTube every month. The content catalog is simply incomparable. Nothing else comes close to what's there. Whatever you want to learn, whatever entertains you, whatever specific niche interest you have, it's on YouTube in depth that no alternative platform can match right now. ODC exists, Rumble exists, PeerTube exists. They have real content and real communities, but they are not YouTube. And for most people, most of what they go to YouTube for cannot be found anywhere else at the same depth. That's the honest truth, and I won't pretend otherwise. But here is something about YouTube that I didn't fully understand until I started looking carefully. YouTube is not primarily an entertainment platform. Entertainment is what you experience as a user. What YouTube actually is, from an engineering and business perspective, is one of the most powerful behavioral analysis machines ever built. The reason it is so powerful is what it measures. And when you watch a video on YouTube while logged in, YouTube records not just that you watched it. It records when you paused, when you skipped forward, and by exactly how many seconds. When you rewound to watch a section again, how many times you returned to a specific moment, what time of day you were watching, what device you were on, what you searched to find the video, what you watched immediately before and after, the specific playlist context you were in. These behavioral signals, the pauses, the rewinds, the skip patterns, the exit moments, are extraordinarily precise windows into what you find compelling, confusing, emotionally resonant, boring, or disturbing. The recommendation algorithm is built on these signals, and that algorithm is one of the most sophisticated persuasion systems ever engineered. Research consistently finds that YouTube's algorithm is optimized primarily to maximize watch time, to keep you watching as long as possible, because extended viewing generates advertising revenue. The algorithm is not optimized for what's true, or what's good for you, or what you'd consciously choose if you reflected carefully. It's optimized for what keeps you watching. And over millions of users and billions of data points, it has become exceptionally good at that. My current approach? I watch YouTube without logging in. You can do this right now. Open a private browsing window, go to youtube.com, and watch anything you want. No account, no history being recorded, no profile being built or refined. You lose subscriptions, watch history, and personalized recommendations. What you keep is access to the entire YouTube catalog and full search functionality. NewPipe on Android replicates most of the logged-in experience, storing your subscriptions locally on your device rather than in a Google account, giving you the convenience without the data collection. Android is where everything becomes most complicated, and the scale of what this means often doesn't land the way it should. Android runs on approximately 72% of all smartphones on the planet, billions of devices. And it was built by Google. Every Android device running Google's apps, Gmail, Maps, Chrome, Search, the Play Store, is a device that is connected to Google's data infrastructure at the operating system level. The Google Play Services framework, the background software layer that makes Google's apps function on Android, runs continuously on your device, with system-level permissions that are extraordinarily broad. It has access to your location, your contacts, your calendar, your photos. It runs in the background at all times, even when you are not actively using any Google app. This isn't a few optional applications you can choose to uninstall. It is woven into the foundation of virtually every Android device that ships with Google's software. Think about what that means in practice. Every morning when you wake up, before you've opened a single app, before you've typed a single search, the layer of Google software running underneath your Android home screen is already active, already connected, already reporting. That's not fear-mongering, that's the architecture. It's also worth understanding what Android represents at a structural level beyond the individual user. Google makes Android available to phone manufacturers for free. The cost to manufacturers is agreeing to pre-install Google's suite of apps and services and to make Google Play Services the default infrastructure layer. The result is that Google's data collection infrastructure is baked into the operating system of most of the world's smartphones before you ever turn the phone on for the first time. When you buy a budget Android device made by any of dozens of manufacturers worldwide, you're buying a device that ships with Google's data layer already installed, already configured, already set to report by default. In 2023, civil liberties organizations published detailed analyses of how Google's location database had been used in law enforcement investigations. People with Android phones and default location settings enabled had their movements tracked, stored by Google, and accessed by authorities through legal process. I moved to an iPhone. Apple has its own data collection practices, and I won't pretend Apple is a privacy paradise. It isn't. But Apple's business model is built on hardware and subscriptions, not advertising data. And that difference in incentive structure produces meaningfully different behaviors. The company that profits from selling you the device has different motivations regarding your data than the company whose revenue depends on monetizing your behavior. For those who want to stay on Android but remove Google's data layer, Graphene OS is a real option, an open-source Android-based operating system built for Google Pixel hardware that removes Google's services entirely and replaces them with privacy-respecting alternatives. It supports sandboxed Google Play, which means you can still run Android apps that require Google's infrastructure, but in an isolated environment that limits how much data those apps can access. It requires technical comfort to configure, but it is a genuinely functioning, daily usable choice for anyone willing to put in that effort. And the community around it is large, active, and helpful to newcomers. Google Photos is the most underexamined part of this entire conversation. And what Google's systems actually do with the images you upload is something most users have never thought about. Google Photos is extraordinarily convenient, automatic. Backup the moment you take a picture. Your entire library accessible from any device. Remarkable AI-powered search that can find photos by face, location, or object without you ever manually tagging anything. The engineering is genuinely impressive. Understanding of what is happening in each photo. Your family gatherings, your children at various ages, your private moments, the medical documents you photographed for personal records, the notes you snapped at a meeting, the WhatsApp conversation you screenshotted for reference, all of it. Analyzed, categorized, understood by a system that never forgets and never stops building on what it knows. Google's stated policy is that your photos are not used for advertising targeting. I want to be fair and repeat that. Google says photos in Google Photos are not used to serve you ads. That is what they say, and I have no evidence to contradict it. But here is the question I kept coming back to, and I couldn't find an answer that fully satisfied me. If Google's AI has analyzed every photo I've ever taken and built a detailed model of the people in my life, the places I frequent, the activities I engage in, the stages my children are going through, and the relationships I maintain, what is the meaningful practical difference between not using it for advertising and the comprehensive knowledge that analysis has already produced? The knowledge exists. The model of my life exists. What it is or isn't used for right now is a policy choice. Policies, as I keep returning to, can change. I move my photos to iCloud with advanced data. Protection enabled, which extends end-to-end encryption to iCloud Photos so that Apple itself cannot access the content of what I have stored there. For non-Apple users, Photos is an excellent alternative. Open source, end-to-end encrypted, built. Specifically on the principle that your photos are private even from the company storing them. Entei cannot see your images. Their business model is built on subscription fees, not on understanding what's in your photo library. Google Drive follows the same architecture as Gmail. Your files are encrypted, but Google holds the encryption keys, which means Google's systems can technically read the content of what you store. This is important to sit with for a moment, because most people intuitively assume that files stored in the cloud are private in a complete sense. Private from other users, private from random people on the internet? Yes, but private from the company storing them? That's a different question. And for Google Drive, the answer is no. Google's own documentation acknowledges that automated systems scan Drive files to provide dim features and enforce policies. Proton Drive uses end-to-end encryption so that Proton cannot access your files even if legally compelled to. For collaborative documents, CryptPad is an open-source end-to-end encrypted alternative to Google Docs that allows real-time collaboration on documents that are private even from the server hosting them. Neither Proton Drive nor CryptPad is quite as polished as Google's offerings, but both are functional, actively maintained, and built on an architecture that means what it says when it uses the word private. Now I want to give you the genuinely honest assessment of what this transition actually looks like in practice, because the reason most people don't make these changes isn't indifference to privacy. It's the reasonable assumption that the process will be painful and disruptive and that the alternatives will be frustratingly inferior. So let me be specific about every service and what the reality actually is. Moving from Gmail to Proton Mail is genuinely easier than any major household move you've ever made. Google Takeout exports your archive. Proton account setup takes 5 minutes. Automatic forwarding activation takes another 5 minutes. Over the following weeks, both inboxes receive your mail while you gradually update your address with the services and contacts that matter. Switching from Google search to DuckDuckGo is the single easiest change you can make today. Open browser settings, change the default search engine, done. 2 days before, it's completely natural. Chrome to Firefox takes 10 minutes to set up with your bookmarks and passwords imported. For daily browsing, it is functionally identical, with the difference that it blocks more trackers by default. Switching from Google Maps to Apple Maps on iPhone requires zero configuration. Apple Maps is already on your phone, and for everyday navigation, it is accurate and completely capable. The only genuinely difficult trade-off on this entire list is YouTube without a logged-in account, because the product experience does change you in meaningful ways. You lose personalized recommendations and subscription feeds. What you keep is the entire catalog and full search. For me, that trade-off is worth it. For others, it won't be, but knowing the choice exists matters. Before I tell you about the moment that made everything concrete, I want to say one more thing clearly and fairly. Google is not the villain of a simple story. Google built genuinely extraordinary things. The search engine changed what it means to have access to information. Gmail made professional email accessible to billions of people who had nothing like it before. Maps changed navigation forever. YouTube created a global platform for human knowledge and creativity, unlike anything that had previously existed. Android put smartphones into the hands of people who couldn't have afforded the alternative. Google built these things, gave most of them away for free, and sustained that generosity through a business model they disclosed in their privacy policy. They are not criminals. They are a company that found a remarkably effective way to fund world-class engineering by treating human attention and human data as the raw material of a commercial product. The question was never whether Google is evil. The question is whether the exchange is one you would have consciously agreed to if you had fully understood what you were exchanging. Your private thoughts, the things you search when you're afraid or confused or curious, your physical movements through the world, time-stamped and cataloged with GPS precision. Your most personal communications, sitting on servers whose systems can decrypt them, your attention, analyzed and sold, all of it in exchange for free email, free search, free maps, free video streaming. For 17 years, I made that exchange without fully understanding it. Then I opened the Google Takeout files. Google Takeout lets you download everything Google has ever collected across every service you've used. I requested my download. It arrived as a large compressed archive. I opened it. Inside was my complete search history going back to 2009, the year I created my account. Every individual search query, every single one, 16 years of searches, things I had been worried about in 2009 that I had completely forgotten, medical symptoms I had searched at 3 a.m. when I was scared and didn't want to worry anyone around me, relationship questions I had typed into a search bar because I didn't know who else to ask, financial anxieties from a period of my life I had moved past, career doubts from a time before I knew how things would turn out, moments of grief, of hope, of curiosity, of private wonder, all of them documented, time-stamped, searchable, right there in a file on my screen. My entire inner life is expressed through searching for 16 years, sitting in a folder I had just downloaded in about 20 minutes. Then I found my location history. Every place Google Maps had tracked me, with precise GPS coordinates and timestamps. My home. Every doctor I'd visited, every trip I'd taken, every errand, every appointment, every journey I had made with a Google account active on my phone. A perfect, continuous physical record of everywhere I had been. Then my YouTube. History? Every video I had watched while logged in with exact timestamps. Then my Gmail archive, thousands of emails. Then metadata from Google Photos. Then records of every app I had ever installed from the Play Store. And then, at the end, the advertising. Preferences file. Dozens of categories Google had assigned to me based on my behavioral patterns. My estimated age range, my inferred interests, the specific taxonomic categories that I had been sorted into for advertising purposes, the commercial model of who I was. I sat with those files open for a long time, looking at what had been built from the pieces of my daily life. And I made my decision, not from fear, not from paranoia, from clarity. The concept of Google collecting your data had just become something visible, concrete, and real rather than abstract. Once you can see it, once it stops being a vague concern and becomes actual files on your screen, a searchable record of your private questions, a timeline of everywhere your body has been, the question of whether you want to continue becomes something very different. I set up Proton Mail that evening. I switched to Firefox and DuckDuckGo. I started using Apple Maps. I moved important files to Proton Drive. I began watching YouTube without logging in. I moved my password. Management to Bitwarden, which is open source, free, and not owned by Google. None of it required special technical skills. None of it was particularly disruptive. All of it is reversible. And I want to end with this. because this is what I most want you to take from everything I've said. I am not telling you that you need to do what I did. Different people have genuinely different needs, different threat models, different acceptable trade-offs. A journalist covering sensitive topics has profoundly different privacy requirements than someone who uses the internet mostly to stay in touch with family. Someone whose employer uses Google Workspace may not be able to change services even if they want to. Someone who genuinely values the YouTube recommendation experience may decide that the personalization is worth the cost. Someone with children may look at Google's Family Link tools and decide the convenience of an integrated ecosystem outweighs the data trade-offs for their particular situation. These are all legitimate positions to hold, and I won't tell you otherwise. What I am saying, and this is the only thing I'm insisting on, is that those decisions deserve to be made with accurate, complete information. And for most of the years I was a Google user, I did not have that. I didn't know about the incognito mode lawsuit and what it revealed. I didn't know that geofence warrants were allowing authorities to pull my location history from Google's servers. I didn't know my Gmail was readable by Google's systems without end-to-end encryption. I didn't know that my search history and viewing habits together painted a portrait of my inner life that advertisers could purchase access to. I didn't know that my phone, sitting on my nightstand while I slept, was periodically checking in with Google and logging its position. I didn't know because nobody laid it all out in one place, calmly, fairly, without either defending Google reflexively or catastrophizing beyond what the facts actually support. Now I know. And there's one thing I want you to do right now, not tomorrow, not someday, right now. Go to myactivity.google.com and sign into your Google account. Look at what's there. Actually, look. See how many years of your life are sitting in that log. See the searches from years ago. See the timestamps. Let the abstract become concrete. Then go to adsettings.google.com and see how Google has categorized you for advertising. See the specific categories assigned to you based on your behavior over time, not to frighten you, not to push you toward any particular decision, but because seeing it is different from knowing it abstractly. Seeing it is what changes the conversation from theoretical to real. It changed mine. And the internet you deserve, the one where privacy is the default, where encryption is the standard, where you are the customer and not the product, is not a distant vision. It exists right now, built by people who decided to make something different. Proton is building it. Mozilla is building it. The developers behind DuckDuckGo, Bitwarden, Graphene OS, NT, NewPipe, all of them are building it today with tools available to you right now for free or for a few dollars a month. Your emails, your searches, your location, your photos, your files, your attention. These things are yours. The choice of who you trust with them is yours. Make it an informed one. That's all this was ever about.